Hey folks, Tim Miller here, and I am ecstatic today to have my dear friend Jeff Rice on with me. Jeff and I go back many, many years. And with all the stuff going on, we try to take an actual event and kind of talk about the before, the during, and the after so that you're equipped and we're all equipped to deal with, growing violence in the country. And I'm going to brag on Jeff a little bit. He's humble and he won't like it, but this guy is a real life action hero. I mean, he will not talk about himself, but let me tell you, folks, he's been there, done that when it comes to all forms of law enforcement, with the Secret Service, with the ATF. Has done kind of every investigation, but also every tactical thing you can do. And I just really respect him. And I will tell you that if I had to go through a door, it would be with this guy because I know he really does not just talk the talk, but he walks the walk. And Jeff, I'm so grateful for you being here today. I know, having walked through some of this journey with you, that October 1st, 2017 is a date you will never forget.
Right.
And I just appreciate your transparency and your humility. And we're going to walk through this. But first, Jeff, just tell everybody a little bit about yourself and don't say you work for the government. Okay.
Well, first, I'd like to thank you for having me today. It's an honor to be on your podcast, so thank you for that. A little bit about myself. I started my law enforcement career in 1996 with the Memphis Police Department. Did a few years in Memphis. Was lucky enough to be hired by Secret Service, where I did start in Memphis, ultimately transferring to Washington, D.C. Did some time at headquarters there, and then went over to the Presidential Protective Division. And while I was there, I was fortunate enough to screen and try out and ultimately make the United States Secret Service Counter Assault Team. That's their specialized tactical unit for the presidential protection over there. I did about 10 years with Secret Service, and we'll fast forward a little bit, and then over to ATF, where I applied for ATF, got hired there, and joined their special response team out of Los Angeles. It's a national team, so although we were based in Los Angeles, we did operations all over the United States, to include, Hawaii, Puerto Rico. So we did travel quite a bit there. I was a entry assaulter while I was there in the beginning of my career with ATF, and then I was fortunate enough to go to sniper school, ironically, and I was a sniper on the team there. Did that for a little bit and was able to become the team commander for a while for the ATF team. And after that, it was retirement time. So that's where I am now.
And Jeff, we got you out of California to Florida. So that's a huge win. We're so honored to have you. Jeff, you're the most qualified guy I know when it comes to, kind of all things tactics. I mean, you've been there, done that. You started trial by fire with Memphis PD and you ended in Los Angeles with ATF. And so if there's anybody that understands, weapons and tactics and all that, it really is you. And so I'm very grateful. And for those of you watching, this is going to be a realistic story that Jeff's going to share personally about what happened during the Las Vegas shooting that he was there attending. And folks, I got to tell you, when I first heard Jeff's story, it rocked my world. I think all of us in law enforcement have been through, the violent encounters where at the end, you're just thankful that you're okay. And sometimes folks are injured or even dead. But I can't imagine the scope of what happened on October 1st in Las Vegas. And so I just want to take us back to that moment. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. YouTube is very specific on what they allow and what they don't allow. Fortunately, this is a video that's on YouTube. Very brief, but it kind of sets the stage for what happened in the middle of the concert that kind of brought us to talk with Jeff today. Jeff, I know that was a clip, and I know for you, we've talked about it for any hero, warrior, or any civilian in a situation like that, you will never forget that moment for the rest of your life. So, if
Correct.
you would talk to me about the before, what happened before you attended that event? Kind of what were your thoughts? And, you're always tactical. I know you, but what was your view of just going to a concert that night?
Well, my wife and I, we had never been to this concert, and we really wanted to go. It was a 3-day festival, so we're really looking forward to all the various shows that were going to go on at the venue. So we'd been there for a couple of days and thoroughly enjoyed the daytime concerts, nighttime concerts. Um, they were fantastic. The security around the venue, while you're walking up, seemed more than adequate for a regular concert. Um, we really enjoyed our days there. It was a really really wonderful event until obviously the night of October 1st. But the one thing I sort of noticed initially was when we were going in, I'm like, man, there's only one way in and out of this place,
Mm, wow.
you know? And it was a fairly large area, like concert venue. There was stages on either opposite side of the venue. You had the main stage, which was closer to the Mandalay Bay side of the venue where the shooter was. And then you had another stage at the complete polar opposite end of the venue. So the larger acts would be on the main stage where Jason Aldean was when the shooting happened. And then you'd have other up and coming artists on the smaller stage on the opposite side of the venue. So we split our time equally between both sides of the venue. So I was very familiar after walking around the venue, what was there. And again, that's the one thing that I noticed is like coming in, there's really only one way in and out of this place.
Hmm.
There was, there were places where I could see, workers at the facility accessing, like taking trash out and things like that, but they weren't normal entrances. Um, so that's really the before is 2 days, 2.5 days of just fun.
Jeff, I noticed, you being highly trained in security, you had already determined where the entrances and exits are. You were situationally aware because you noticed the security measures in place. What would you say to that average person, that is going into a venue? Obviously, you hit two of the ones we really highlight. What are other things that would recommend that people notice as even before something like this would happen?
Well, again, your ingress and egress, like,
Hmm.
I mean, because understand those places are bottlenecks and they're only going to be worse
Mm,
when a critical event happens. So you're more than likely not going to be able to exit the same way you entered. That's just the way it's going to end up. Um, while you're in these venues, look for, hey, I know I'm not going to be able to get out where I got in. Where else can I potentially be able to leave? Because that's the ultimate goal is to get the heck out of there,
mm.
and get away from the situation. And thirdly, and this is really one thing that I didn't look at until I was behind the 8 ball, right? As the bullets were flying, was if I can't get out of here, where's my best substantial piece of concealment and or cover? Preferably cover, but if you don't have cover, concealment may help you as well. So those are really the three things.
Yeah, Jeff, it's funny. I thank you, for that because, you're now on the Lionheart team. You're training with us, but
Right,
those are the four things, I drive home, or three of the four every time. First off, when you walk in, where are the exits and the entrances so you can get out? Secondly, what are people doing? Because
right,
body language can communicate, a threat. And then thirdly, where's cover and concealment? And then fourthly, to your point, what would my plan be to get myself, my family out of here? And so it's interesting, our training is similar. So those
right.
are the four things that we're looking for. I want to ask you though, you're a gun guy, obviously. Did you notice armed security? Protecting the venue, was that a thought as you were entering the venue?
Yes, there's quite a few of the Las Vegas Metro Police Department officers that really were on that on the outer ring
Mm-hmm.
and the middle ring. But now that I look back on it, I did not see one armed Las Vegas police officer inside the actual venue.
Wow. That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Just a dumb question because I'd love your. Was anybody armed with rifles, or was it still at a point where officers only had their sidearms?
Um, Before the actual event,
Right.
it was standard law enforcement presence with sidearms only. Long guns were, I assume, in their trunks or in their rifle racks in their cars.
Yeah. So you walk in. I'm assuming folks, are having alcoholic beverages. Were they allowed in the venue itself?
They sold the alcohol in the venue. You could not bring anything in.
Great. Okay. So
And I
folks.
mean, you were wanded. I mean, the security was fairly decent, like the
Hmm.
entry security.
Hmm.
So, I mean, sometimes it took a while to get in because they were thoroughly wanding individuals and, patting down and whatnot. But yeah, I felt relatively safe with respect to people bringing stuff in.
Wow, that's a great observation too, because I mean, who thinks, wow, I really have to be watching every floor of adjacent buildings,
Yeah,
for and Jeff, I know that was your life. It was my life for a season. That's all you think about,
right.
with the service. You're thinking, man, and recently with the Trump situation too, and Butler, and actually both of them, the ability for someone with a rifle to do tremendous damage, it is amazing. So you go into the venue. Did you particularly choose a place to be, or how did you select where you were?
So the night of the shooting, um, this up and coming artist, Luke Combs, believe it or not, he wasn't even
Hmm.
famous at that time, was playing on the stage on the opposite end of the main stage.
Okay.
So, we'd heard some of his stuff. So, I was like talking with my wife. I'm like, why don't we go down and see Luke Combs? So we were down there initially. And towards the end of his set, it was starting to get a little bit more crowded up at the main stage because the headliner, final night, Jason Aldean, was getting ready to play.
Hmm.
So, I sort of look back on this as maybe one of the things that probably saved our lives without even knowing it at the time was I wanted to stay to the very end of Luke Combs. And because of that, when we got back up to the Jason Aldean side before he started playing, it was quite crowded, probably 20 rows deep from the front of the stage. And, you'd have to, meander, push your way to the front.
Hmm.
Um, my wife wanted to try to get as close to the front as we could. But I was like, you know what? I think we're sort of fine right here, about 15, 20 rows back.
Hmm.
Like, I don't really want to push all of, get up there. And then, you're somewhat trapped.
Hmm.
And it was really mostly for like reasons of, if I want to go to the bathroom, I don't want to have to find my way all the way back up.
Right.
It wasn't a
Right.
security thing. It was
The
more of a
important
creature
thing.
comfort thing, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So that's sort of where we ended up. As you're looking at the stage, about 15 or 20 rows back, a little bit to the right hand side, like not much, but not dead stage center, but just a little bit to the right of stage center. So that's ultimately how we ended up where we were.
So where was that in position to the shooter?
So the shooter, from where we were standing, looking up at the stage, the shooter was at our like 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, that general area, obviously elevated at, almost the top of the Mandalay,
Hmm.
and probably, I don't know, 500 meters away.
Wow.
I mean, he was a long way away.
Wow. Wow.
And like, for those that have been to Vegas, you know how long it takes you to walk between these casinos. I mean, they're
Hmm.
gigantic. The
Right.
properties are gigantic. So he was quite a distance away.
And so take me to that moment. You're in the moment, you're enjoying it. You're obviously, there to enjoy 3 days. I didn't realize it was 3 days.
Yeah.
That's amazing. But now all of a sudden take me to that moment where, all hell breaks loose.
So we're sitting there or standing there, and Jason Aldean is playing When She Calls Me Baby. Obviously, the song that was on just a minute ago. And the all of a sudden, I hear this volley of what I recognize immediately as gunfire. Um, I didn't believe that it was initially from an elevated, like, sniper type position. I
Hmm.
just thought it was like maybe a drive by,
Oh, mm,
because there was one quick volley, like,
right.
initially, and everybody's yelling, "Somebody's shooting fireworks." And I immediately, yelled, "That's gunfire. Everybody, get down." And they're like, "No, no, it's just fireworks." And at this point, I'm like, I'd already pretty much foot sweat my wife, and unfortunately, she face planted into the ground,
Yeah,
because I wanted her down.
right.
And then just a couple seconds later, like, that's when the directed, uh, consistent fire started, and it was maybe a second or two after that, 5 or 6 people were standing right in front of me, like, literally the people right in front of me were shot and killed,
Oh,
and some people behind me. And at
wow.
that point, I was like, "Oh my goodness!" Like,
Mm.
I'm here with my wife. I'm not at work. I don't have my team. Like, this just got real really fast. And that first volley of fire, it seemed like 1,000 rounds coming at us, and it seemed to me to be. It sounded like automatic gunfire. Um, So I was like, "Oh my god, somebody has managed to get in here with a machine gun." I'm like, it's about to get really bad.
And you're
Eh,
not thinking that it's elevated at that point because
Not right then,
right,
no.
right.
So the fire is continuing and continuing, and I'm like, people right around me are getting hit. I'm like, "Man, we got to move. Like, if we stay here, we're going to get killed." I
Mm,
mean, I'm on the X. I got to get off, right? And so, I have my wife with me, and we get up to go to start, you know, uh, getting out off the X, and one of the guys behind me was shot through and through in the neck. So now I'm like, all right, we got to move, but I can't leave him there 'cause he was still alive, right? So at that point, I have my wife in front of me. I pick him up and put him over my shoulders, sort of like a fireman carry, but from across. And now I'm looking, you know, where can I go? I can't get out of here the same way I came in because that's in the same direction where the shooter was, right? I'm like, I'm not going that way. And then about 50 yards away, I see this big metal box. That's the only thing that's out in this converted parking lot. I'm like, that's where we're going. But the way the venue was built is you have the main stage, and then right off the center, there's a bike rack that shoots perpendicular out about 30 yards, 40 yards to where the main sound mixing area is, where they have all the boards and where they really control the lighting and all that stuff. So there was that bike rack that went out to that, and then that whole sound stage was wrapped in bike rack. And then there's bike rack that went again perpendicular to the other that bike rack, if that sort of makes sense, right?
mhm,
So it's like they have you basically cordoned off in areas. So I'm going to say 4 quadrants. You have the upper right, the upper left, the back right, and the back left. Just by the way that these bike racks were designed, then there's walking areas like on the outside of them, so you can get around them, right? Well, there were so many people there, and once the fire intensified, and I was like, "Man, we got to move, we got to move, we got to move." We started moving. Put my wife in front of me, like held her at arm's length, like so I could control her, and steer, and I had that guy with me, and I'm like, "Man, we got to get over this bike rack." Everybody's flooding for the bike rack now, right? to get out of the killing zone where we just were. And they're trampling each other. And we get to the bike rack. My wife falls on the ground and she's getting trampled now. And I'm trying to fight people and pull them off of her and trying to pick her up and have this other dude. I'm trying to get over the bike rack. Like, it's just chaos right now. And the fire's still continuing. It hasn't stopped. So, you know, you hear this constant rate fire. And finally, I was able to pick her up. And I literally grabbed her by one hand and flipped her upside down, like head over heels, over the bike rack. And when I was able to jump back over with the other guy that was on my shoulders. And now I'm zeroed in on that piece of cover. I only got, I don't know, maybe 25 yards left. So we're moving towards that. And you know how the security guys wear those bright yellow shirts that say like event staff or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
We're moving, and this guy's between me and that box, right? I'm like, I got to get to that box. I got to get to that box right now. And he takes one right in the chest. And that's the first person my wife truly saw get shot. I mean, she was on the ground when everybody in front of us was shot, but she actually saw that. So that was her first experience of seeing somebody shot like live right in front of you, right? So we continue on, and I finally make it to that box, and I dump her and the guy behind the guy that I brought with us behind the box. Get them situated, get her situated, lay him down, and start assessing him, you know, medically what was going on. You know, I obviously I knew he was shot through the neck, and it was clear it was through both sides. But he wasn't shot anywhere else. You know, I started assessing, does he have anything else? I mean, obviously that's super serious, but you know, just the quick assessment. It was not very long, you know, maybe 30 seconds, right?
Yeah, right.
So, you know, I told my wife, stay here. You know, I'm going to go see what I can do for him for a second. And, you know, I put my hands or my fingers in there. I'm like, all right, well, here's this, I assume was carotid, right?
Mm.
And I could feel the pulse pumping in there. I'm like, okay. So then I pinch that off and it starts coming out the other side.
Oh boy,
So now I'm like, man,
this
like,
is not good.
it's not good. Like,
Mm.
I can't pinch them both off or he's not going to get any blood to his brain, right? So that was
Uh,
sort of a deflating,
yeah.
you know, situation. Because, like, even if he was on an operating table, I mean, they couldn't have saved him on that, you know? But I kept trying to work on him. And then, yeah, I was probably 10 or 15 feet behind the box because, you know, my wife was there. So I needed a little bit of room. So as I'm out there working on him, now I guess the shooter, if he had a scope or what he had, but he was shooting it at like me personally because I'm on the
Wow.
ground working on this guy and there's bullets impacting the ground right next to me. So I'm like, time to go. Grab him, pull him back behind the box, and the now he starts shooting the box. It's like ding, 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 ding. You know, I'm like, oh great, right? Like this guy's zeroed in on us. So that was a concerning uh, time.
Jeff, I got to pause you here. I mean, this is an unbelievable story that highlights your courage. I can't imagine um, with my wife and trying to navigate a panic crowd, which would probably be the understatement. And there's so many, I mean, really good lessons that I'd like to pause just for a second. Quite frankly, I'm breathing, you know, processing exactly, you know, what you're saying, because number one, you made a decision to move. I know in the Marine Corps that's a big decision, simply because, and you're a trained expert sniper, it's harder to hit a moving target.
Right.
Why do you think he targeted? Was it just the massive people, that same group where you were? Because it sounds like you were in the center of the kill zone.
Yes, we were. I don't know why. It was the closest quadrant to where
Hmm.
he was. So
Yeah,
I think he was like, first
kind of
first
killer.
group of people.
Yeah.
That's it. You know.
Now, I've heard reports that there were different weapons used, and you're a trained expert. Were there different weapons used? And how did you know that, or did you even notice that?
No, I did. Um, so after he started shooting at the box the first time, looked around the edge of the box, and there's two young ladies literally standing on. There's again another piece of bike rack sort of in front of that box, and they're standing there. And I'm like, man, like if they don't get out of there, they're gonna get killed. So I jumped out from the box, jumped the fence, and grabbed them. And I'm like, hey man, you got to come back with me. One of them, I picked her up, pushed her over the bike rack, and I'm like, go there, right? Go to that box. And Corey, my wife, was back there, like, come here, come here, come here, right? And I'll never forget the other lady. She looks at me. I'm like, here, I'm going to help you over the fence. And this is actually comical now that I look back. She's like, I don't need your help. I do CrossFit. I'm like, I don't, then get over the dang, get over the dang fencing, right?
Yeah.
So I was able to get them. Now I have my wife, these two girls, and the gentleman that was shot. And they start shooting at us again. And it's what I thought was a 2-2-3, like it was ding, 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 ding,
Hmm.
because this box was filled with like heavy foam and extra sound equipment stuff, thankfully.
Thank
Um,
God. Yeah.
and I remember talking to Corey and the girls. I'm like, look, hear what this sounds like when he was shooting at it. I'm like, I'm going to go back and work on this guy. If you hear anything different than this sound, let me know. And they did. They're like, hey, it sounds differently. So I went back up there, and now it wasn't tink tink, it was thud thud thud.
Oh man.
And I looked at that Corey, and I said, he just switched to a 308.
My gosh, that's a
You know,
nightmare.
it is a nightmare. So I'm
Wow.
like, man, we are in serious trouble potentially right now, but I'm not leaving this. And I said, look, pay attention to this box. If you see any indentations starting to happen, you know,
We got to go.
we got to go, and we
Yeah.
have to be prepared to go. And then I got her and the two girls together. I'm like, if we start seeing these indentations on the backside of this metal box, I'm like, here's where we're going. And I said, see that piece of cover right there, our concealment? That's our first stop. There's our second stop. There's our third stop. Like, so they knew, like, there was a plan of action, and we're all going together. You know,
Jeff, this is so powerful. One of the things I know as you train with us, we stress the whole processing of OODA loop,
right?
your observe, orient, decide, act, and how that's not a one-time thing. It's an ongoing thing. And man, I'm so thankful that your training was so excellent. Many, even in law enforcement, they're not trained to do what you did. And that is profound to me, that I often, when we're training folks, companies and corporations, that you must adopt the Jason Bourne mindset. You're
Yeah.
moving, but you're in that next fight. You're
Oh
in
yeah.
that next fight. And I just love how perfectly you're laying that out, because well, talk to me about what the rest of the people, the untrained people, what are they doing in the crowd during all this?
They're running around, uh, panicking. I
Hmm.
mean, I'm not gonna lie to you. Like, I was, if you want to call it panic mode, I don't know. It wasn't panic mode, but it was like, oh
Sure.
dang, like we're in a really like this is super
Yeah.
serious.
Yeah. Courage under
But
stress, right?
yeah, they're running all over the place,
Hmm.
uh, and not all of them, but 90% of them only cared about themselves.
Wow.
How can I save myself? How can I save myself? And the other 10% are the true heroes of that night, because they stayed, they helped people over the fence, fencing, even as rounds are coming by them. So there's a 10% of people that I don't know who they were or what their training was, or if they had any,
Right.
but they were helping as many people as possible.
You know,
Um,
Jeff, I got to pause you here because this is such a huge takeaway. My good friend Chuck Holton, who's
mhm.
also a man of faith. By the way, all disclosure, all three of us are people of faith, because I know you know that, Jeff, but you shouldn't be there. You know, you know, I think the good Lord said, "Hey, get down there and care for Jeff right now and his wife,"
He
because
sure did.
yeah. But one of the things my friend Chuck Holton says all the time is, he says every place you go should be safer because you're there.
Right.
And this is a great example. 90% they were worried about, the big three, I call it, me, myself, and I.
Correct.
While the 10%, and let's just hope they had some training to respond to, you and I say this all the time when we're training. In that crisis, you rise or fall to the level of your training. Your training was so, amazing. Now, did you find that people were even able to hear directions you were trying to give them?
Yes, because all the sound of music had been shut down,
Mhm.
and really the only sounds were people screaming and gunfire.
Wow.
That's that was it. There was this one young lady. I'm like, "Hey, come here, come here, come here," and she was trying to. She was on the other side of the fence, and she was trying to move through the active shooting zone, like
Hmm.
where all the fire is being directed. I'm like, "No, no, 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 no! Don't go that way! Don't go that way!" And I don't know. She looked at me. I don't know if she heard me or if she just was so panicked she couldn't follow direction. Or I'm like, "No, don't run, don't run, don't run! Come here!" And then she got shot and killed trying to cross the field, trying to get to underneath the stage. If
You know, it's amazing how people do respond differently, which is why that whole process of training how your mind and body will respond. I think, you and I train at its audio exclusion. Your brain is so overwhelmed by trying to process that it can ignore, kind of
right.
what's going on. And wow. Jeff, let me ask you, did you hear any kind of return gunfire? Did Were officers able to get rifles out, or was it just over so quick that they couldn't return fire to the point of the shooter?
Honestly, the only fire I heard was an incoming fire.
Hmm.
Um, uh, let me back up just a little bit.
Hmm.
Once, as soon as I got to that where that box was, even before he started shooting the actual box, I was hearing the rounds coming by. And at that point, I was pretty confident of where it was coming from. And the
Hmm.
reason being is back in Secret Service, when I was going through our counter assault team basic school, like one of our missions was, dealing with snipers from known locations, right? So one of the training evolutions, we were out in a field, ironically, and they had people, uh, simulated snipers, but firing real rounds with different calibers
Hmm.
at different distances and different direct cardinal directions from us. And we were in the middle of the field, and all of a sudden, there'd be, a round would come over our heads. I mean, safely, but
Hopefully.
not right over our heads, a little
Yeah.
bit.
Right.
So after each round, we had our instructors there, and we would debrief. What did we hear? And they'd be like, "Okay, Jeff, where do you think that came from?
Hmm.
You know,
Wow.
and what caliber do you think that was?"
Wow.
And I'll never forget, Jerry Marshall was teaching us that day. And after all this was over, I actually looked Jerry up and called him. and I said, that one training evolution that you provided
Saved
to
my life.
me and my team saved me and my wife's life.
Oh my gosh, man, that's
So
so.
that's when I sort of knew it was a sniper from an elevated position and not a, you know, street crime drive-by type of thing, right?
So Jeff, you get to the point, you're on the other side, you're hiding behind, and the intensity of fire is consistent. How long was the fire going on, as best you
Man,
can recall?
4 days.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe 15 minutes
That's
somewhere.
an eternity
Oh, it
on
was. It was
fire.
horrible.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
eh, Not only did we have the fire coming at us, from against, it's still at the 2 o'clock position
Hmm.
ish. That but there were bleachers also encircling this place, aluminum bleachers. So when those bullets would hit that aluminum, it ricocheted. So I mean, it sounded like there were bullets coming from all directions.
Wow.
My wife actually got hit in the head with a ricochet, and it cut her all the way down the head.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So, and I mean, ricochets sound way different. It's more of a zinging sound, right, than
Right.
a snap pop.
It
But
probably
it
was a
still doesn't mean
fragment.
they can't
Yeah.
kill you or put an
Yeah.
eye out or something, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was coming from 360 at this point. There was so much.
So you made the decision to hold behind the steel box, and it just kept going on. I want to take us back to that initial volley, just so folks that are joining us maybe later can get an idea of kind of how quickly it happened, but also what it was like to be there. And I want you to think through as Jeff's telling the story, because this is important, folks. These things are happening more and more across our country. And I don't care who you are, not all of us are going to be highly trained, snipers like Jeff, but we can make a difference if we understand some things. But I think it's important to ask yourself, and Jeff's going to give us some guidance here in a second, kind of what could we do in the middle of that. But let's go back to this again. Now, Jeff, one thing I noticed there were pauses. I'm assuming those pauses are based on reloads, tactical reloads, or switching to another weapon. How often, now that you reflect back, did you notice that there were pauses? And at that time, did you say, okay, we're trained in the Marine Corps, you wait until you could get up and move.
Right.
Did that cross your mind tactically? Because I know there are a lot of folks on this podcast that are weapons folks, former military folks. So did that thought cross your mind?
Not initially, no.
Hmm.
Uh, Initially, it was get off the X. I don't
Yeah.
care
Right.
if it's belt fed and he has a mile long belt.
Right.
Like I'm moving
Right.
until I can get somewhere where I can assess. Hey, am I okay? Is my
Hmm.
wife okay? You know, uh, are we able to safely take cover here?
Hmm.
Um, if we're not able to take cover here, like, can we just take cover for a second and do
Yeah.
that assessment real fast and then move on again, right?
Yeah.
Because the last thing you may not feel that you're shot.
Yeah. That's right. Right.
So I think that self-assessment real quick of, hey man, like, do I have any holes in me, is
Yeah.
important.
So Jeff, you get there, the shooting stops. Walk me through what you do then.
um the shooting stopped, uh, and once it stopped, and pardon the pun, but I was a little bit gun shy of moving away from that cover, right?
Hmm.
I'm like, man, we're not moving, because I still hadn't seen a police officer
Wow.
inside.
Wow.
I mean, this whole thing, right? And I'm looking around, and there's, I never saw one police officer where I was inside the entire time. I'm sure they were busy dealing with the mass casualties that had already been brought out,
Hmm.
or trying to address, what the actual shooter.
Hmm.
But
Yeah. I saw some video outside of the venue of, and I can't, this is not condemning, but the officers realized they were under fire as well,
yeah,
and taking cover behind vehicles. I
hmm
think, many of them were focused on where is this guy and how do we stop it from happening?
hundred
Um,
percent. And
yeah.
I would have been doing the same thing if I were
Right.
them. You know,
Right.
you don't do
Right.
anybody any good if you're dead, right?
Yeah. That's right.
So
That's
let's take
exactly
cover and
right.
figure out what's going on, and hey, and then how can we maneuver on the subject?
Yeah.
Now maneuvering on somebody that's on the 38th floor or wherever he was makes things a little bit more difficult, right?
Yeah. Jeff, let me ask you, so it stops. You got, how is the person that took the shot through the neck at this point? Because we're
Uh, he,
talking,
he's
what about,
he's
he's,
dead.
he's gone. Mm.
Yeah, I mean he died literally with me working on him.
Oh.
So yeah, he basically died in my hands.
Now, how about the other? You mentioned there were two others plus your wife. How are they managing in the midst of this?
I just told them to keep their heads down,
Hmm.
and as I'm working on this guy, my wife and the two other girls are just constantly repeating the Lord's Prayer.
Mm. Wow, that's a great takeaway right there.
Yeah,
That'll bring peace to you in the midst of a hellish storm.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
So they were all just repeating the Lord's Prayer, laying behind that metal box as I'm trying to work on this guy, and I clearly remember hearing that.
Hmm. And so it comes to a stop. You realize, okay, I'm assuming you took a tactical pause,
hmm
and then what did you do after that?
I took that tactical pause mainly because the other two times that I didn't take long enough tactical pause, when I tried to take the guy back out and work on him, he kept shooting at me out
You
there.
drew
So,
fire. Yeah.
yeah. So I was like,
Wow.
man, I'm not going to make the same mistake three times, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I took a little bit longer, maybe 10-minute tactical pause. Like
Wow.
it was a while.
It's
Like,
a long time.
yeah, because
Yeah.
I'm like, man, we have really good cover, and
Right.
he hasn't maneuvered yet because it
What?
hadn't come
Yeah.
from a different direction, right? It was still hitting that same side of the box throughout the entire. So I was fairly confident it was one shooter,
Wow.
um,
Wow.
minus the ricochets, right? But
Yeah.
so after that long tactical pause, I'm like, okay, that same route that I briefed that we're gonna take if we have to leave. I'm still not 100% confident that this guy's not going to start shooting again. So
Yeah.
when we leave, we're taking that route because
Yeah.
it had really, really great concealment
Yeah.
once we broke the corner of that music soundstage. So that's what we did together. I'm like, all right, 1, 2, 3, move. Let's go. Right. So we're moving. We're moving. We get to the first one. I'm like, pause, look around, make sure nothing's going on. Like, not that there's not another shooter just walking around, because
Mm.
that's another thing. I wasn't worried about another elevated shooter, but I'm still maybe in my head, I'm like, well, I don't know if this guy has partners that are waiting for people to get out. Like, just all this crazy stuff starts going through your head, right?
Well, I
So
think
when,
that's great training. Because I mean that. I mean, most people would be, hey, diddle diddle, they're getting out of there.
yeah,
But you kept that tactical mindset, which, to your point, I mean, if it's what we think's coming in the days ahead, a 3, 4, 5 man Al Qaeda team, whoever, that's exactly what's going to happen. They,
yeah,
they're going to catch crowds coming out. Um, wow.
that's what I was really worried about. Like I said, throughout the initial shooting, I was like, man, I was very confident it was one person because again, it was the same, or it was coming from the same direction. It
Right.
wasn't. We weren't encircled, and we
Right.
weren't.
Did the different weapons throw you off at all?
It did actually, yeah, but
Yeah. Yeah.
because it was hitting the same side of that box,
Yeah.
I was like, he just has two different calibers.
That's so amazing. Wow. Wow.
So that, yeah. Um, so
So
we make
that,
our 3 points, right? On and that's pretty much took us to all the concealment we had.
Right.
At this point, we're moving back towards the Tropicana, which is on the back side of the venue where the Luke Combs stage was.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the only way. Like, I'm not going out back on Las Vegas Boulevard where, the Mandalay, where the shooting was coming from, right? I'm like, there's no way I'm taking these ladies or
Right.
myself
Right.
in that direction.
Right.
I'm like, and, I'm like, I know it's a little bit further, but we have this concealment to this point. And then
Right.
once you get to that point, it didn't matter which way you went, it was all field.
Yeah. Wow.
So I'm like, once we get to that field, we got to get it.
Got
Like,
to move.
we got to move. We're not
Yeah.
stopping until we get to that gate that was at the very back side. And that's one of those gates that I told you about where workers are bringing stuff in and out. It's wide open right by now
Yeah.
because people had broken it down. Like, it was mass chaos, people trying to get out of there.
So is at this point, are emergency medical services coming into the venue?
No,
So they're still not. Wow.
no, not that
So
I saw.
yeah.
Um, so we started beating feet across that field towards the Tropicana, and right as we break like the actual venue fencing, I guess I would call it, on the backside of the Tropicana, I see a guy and a girl on the ground. So I stop. I'm like, "Hey, man, are you okay?" And he's like, "I think I saw something. I think I saw the shooter." I'm like, now I go back into law enforcement mode, right?
Right.
I'm like, "Let me see your ID." And the reason I did that is in case the shooting started again, I knew who he was
Right.
because he's a potential witness, right?
Right.
I mean, I didn't know anything at this point, but somebody tells me they saw something, like,
Yeah.
I'm going to take it
Especially the
seriously.
shooter. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I took his ID and I took my phone out and I took a picture of it. I'm like, "Here's your ID back," because I didn't want to keep it in case, he had to go to the
Right.
hospital or whatever, right?
Right.
I'm like, "Are you okay?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm okay." I'm like, "You're coming with you and your wife. You're coming with me." So this nightmare keeps going, Tim. We make it all the way to I can't remember it's the name of the road that runs right in front of the old Hooters casino and the Tropicana. Uh, the road Tupac was killed on.
Hmm.
Sunrise, maybe. So we get out there and I'm like, all right, I'm moving as far away from Las Vegas Boulevard as I can get,
Right.
which was the Hooters Hotel, because right next to that is basically a heliport area of the airport.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, they're not going to let you in the airport, right? So I'm like,
Right.
we're going in the Hooters. So on the way up there, there's a casualty collection point, and there's a lot of people that were shot and dead that are laying there. And I went up to one of the EMTs. I'm like, "Hey, man, I need to talk to Las Vegas Metro. Like, I got a potential witness with me that saw the shooter." And the EMT tells me, he's like, "Hey, man," he's like, "good luck. You're not going to see one of them for probably 2 days." I'm like, "Well, I have a witness here." They're like, "Well, just hold on to him." So, and there was a car parked there, and there's a dead body like laying out of the car. So I tell the girls to go into the casino, go as far back and to the left as you can go, right? And so they go in there, and the EMT is like, "Hey, man, do you mind watching over these bodies? Like, we've got people that are actually still alive that we need to work on, but we need some, but we don't have the personnel." Because I, let them know I was a law enforcement officer, and they're like, "Do you mind watching over these bodies until somebody can come and we can start loading them up?" I'm like, "Yeah, I could do that," but I still had the guy with me, the witness, because in case I saw a Metro dude, I was going to grab him,
Mm-hmm.
right, and be like, "Hey, you two need to talk." Um, and unfortunate for the gentleman that was with me, he had to sit there with me and all these people that had been shot and just dump there, right? So finally get relieved from that. Never see the Metro guy. go in the casino, find where the girls went. I told them to go all the way to the back to the left. There's a bar or restaurant back there. So I get back there and the chaos erupts again. There's more shooters on the strip. There's one across the street at New York, New York. They're starting to go hotel to hotel. I'm like, are you kidding me? So we didn't have guns or anything with us, right? But we were in a bar in a kitchen area and they had a bunch of cleavers and knives. I'm like, okay, well, this is where we're making our stand. This is where we're making our stand. I'm like, if they come in I put all the girls in back in the cooler, like leave the door open as long as you can. But if stuff starts happening, that, you know, just stay here for a minute. And I got a bunch of dudes and we all got, the biggest knives we could get. And we had ambush points as you're coming in to the restaurant area where we were just going to jump down and start stabbing and hopefully get their guns and, assault them and their buddies, like a counter assault, right? So, that probably went on for another couple of hours.
Where did that information come from, Jeff?
I don't know.
So it was the
Somebody
rumor
just
mill?
came in.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't from anybody that was an official.
Right.
But
Right.
at this point, like I can't discount it.
Yeah. Wow. What a nightmare.
Yeah.
What a nightmare. So when did you finally feel like, okay, it's secure enough now, I can do what I need to do?
Probably after 2 hours in the hotel or in the casino.
Were
Probably about
you
two
in
more hours.
contact with 911 or were they just overwhelmed?
No, they were overwhelmed.
Yeah.
I don't even know if 911 worked. I
Yeah.
never tried it.
Yeah. So how did you get information that you were all clear at that point?
Well, we stayed in there for maybe about 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody was given any information.
Right. Right.
Um,
Was hotel management in contact with you, or were they
no,
just fighting for the, or they're
they
just,
were gone. There was nobody there. They shut everything down, locked up. They were gone, man.
wow,
Like
what a
right
mess.
initially,
Yeah.
they were. I mean, they didn't want their employees to get hurt, right?
Yeah. Wow.
So I mean, we basically just sort of took over
Yeah.
their area, and that was going to be our hardened, last line of defense was right there.
Now, Jeff, during this, obviously you're trained, you're seasoned, you know how to process in the midst of that. What were you saying to the girls and the guy and the girl that you picked up? What were you saying to them in the midst of all this carnage, unimaginable carnage?
Well, I was trying to explain to them step by step or phase. I'm going to call it phase by phase, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of you had the shooting phase,
Mm-hmm.
you had the evacuation phase, and
Right.
now we have the phase at the casino, right?
Right.
3 different phases.
Right.
So I'm like, hey, here's where we are now. Here's some things we can expect may or may not happen, and if they do happen, something bad, this is what we're going to do as a
Love it.
unit.
Yeah.
And if they
Yeah.
don't happen and we're finally free and we're released or we're self-released to get out of here, here's where we're going to go. Again, like trying to move us further away
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
from the Mandalay Bay at every step,
So did you notice any of them trying to go into panic?
No, believe it or not, they
That's
didn't.
amazing. That's
They
amazing.
they really handled it very, very well. And I think communication between us was
Yeah,
probably key to that. Like
absolutely. Yeah,
providing them with information,
yeah,
providing them with, hey, here's the plan, you know.
yeah. So one of the things, obviously when we're training active violence that, I know but maybe our audience doesn't, is to do exactly what Jeff just did or said, and that's keep them engaged, because if you're giving them instructions and direction, it's very hard for them to go towards panic. The other thing is, and we've talked a lot on this channel about the importance of emergency or box breathing, that you're
Yep.
maintaining regular breathing, because if your brain can't think, because it's
Yeah.
overwhelmed. That's a problem. Jeff, I have a million questions, and this could be a 10-hour podcast, but maybe we'll come back and do another one. But
Yeah.
a couple basic questions. How important was physical fitness in your ability to not only get through that, but lead that?
Hugely important. J- Having to navigate and jump over barriers
Right,
with people on your back,
right,
being able to pick up things and move them, or direct with one arm and grab something with the other. Cardiovascularly, hugely important. Not to get tired. Now, you have a lot of adrenaline, I get that, but that
right,
adrenaline's eventually going to go away, right?
right, right.
So cardiovascular endurance was huge. Uh, and I think the cardiovascular endurance makes your brain work better,
Yeah, amen.
you know, so you can
Yeah,
make clearer decisions.
yeah, yeah. And how along that line, I know, you and I've been out of Beltsfield. We've done attacks on principles. You drill it over and over again in the service.
Hmm.
How important was that regular training? You mentioned one aspect, just being able to hear and identify, the shots being fired, the type, caliber, location, all those kinds of things. How important was the tactical elements of the training? Here's where I'm going. A lot of folks say, "Hey, I got my gun and I go to the range and I shoot that target and I'm good to go." And, we're both firearms instructors.
Right.
And my opening line is, so far, I've trained 40 years and I haven't had a paper target shoot back at me.
Right.
So, talk to me about the importance of tactical training, moving, thinking, identifying cover, all that kind of stuff. And what would be your advice to someone that's just carrying that weapon, maybe in his glove box at this point?
With respect to tactical training, we'll start off with shooting. Uh, Standing statically and shooting a piece of paper will do you no good. It'll get you killed.
Hmm,
So you have to practice shooting and moving,
hmm.
whether that's laterally, aggressive towards the target, or retreating, backwards and shooting. All of that is, all four of those are equal, or three of those are equal, just as equally as important as any one. So shooting and moving, huge. Um, you know, like, again, tactically, when you're inside of a house, like as part of a SWAT team, you're making entry, you know the plan is perfect until you
Mhm.
hit the door, and then there is no more plan. So, like, the bad guy always has a say, right? So you're
Right.
constantly adapting, you're constantly moving through the house, you're recognizing your LCC on approach, last concealment cover. And once you're in the house, obviously the plan is probably not the plan anymore. um, but you had a base plan, so everybody's on the same mindset. So that's the training mindset, right? We train together, and now we're in this, and things have changed. But guess what? We still have a basic understanding of what we're going to do. As you're trying to accomplish that goal, you're picking out, as you're moving through the house, where's
Yeah.
my best concealment or cover in case rounds start coming through the wall, right?
And that's important for home defense, isn't it?
Yes, it is, because
Yeah.
they're going to come right through that wall. There's nothing stopping them.
Yeah. But
Unless
if
they hit
you
a two
don't,
by four.
yeah, I'm surprised how many folks that, we talk about in this world, you have to be your own security director,
100%.
hoping that you're calling 911 and the heroes come running in the door and everything's saved. Probably not a good plan,
No.
these days. So, what's your home defense? As I'm listening to you, you were able to navigate on the fly because you really understood the principles and you knew how to do it. You practiced them.
Right.
And yeah, there's so much meat here. We're going to have to do another takeaway on this, but I guess the final thing, because you talked about the importance of fitness, the importance of tactics. What about the medical though? I know a lot of guys that they have that that cat tourniquet. Some carry it on their person.
Hmm.
Um, I'm sure if you woke up on October 1st and said, "Hey, I'm going to be in a mass casualty event today," you probably would have said, "I'm probably not going to go." You
Yes,
know,
that would have been number one.
yeah, I'll go tomorrow. But
Right.
to you obviously knew what to do instinctively. What would you encourage everybody listening to do in terms of getting some, decent medical training, not knowing if we're going to be in the middle of something like that?
Right. Well, I would highly encourage that. I mean, uh, above and beyond the basic CPR classes, right?
Hmm. Yeah,
Um, those are critically important. Uh, but I think we've moved beyond our biggest problem: somebody having a heart attack.
yeah,
You know,
true. Yeah,
so I think you need to. Everybody should take a medical class on gunshot wound,
yeah,
how to treat and manage gunshot wound,
yeah,
uh, our blood flow management, basically, right? Like
yeah.
how are we going to stop the bleeding? Basically,
And
stop
that's
the bleed.
Yeah, that's the thing that we train. I mean, it's not rocket science, but we do the stop the bleed training. It's a
Yeah,
For those that haven't heard, please listen carefully. Department of Homeland Security developed it after the Boston bombing because when the bombs went off, you had all these people with catastrophic bleeding that had someone known how to apply a tourniquet, how to do pressure, pack pressure wounds and that kind of thing. It would have saved the day. And so I really highly encourage you. I mean, there's so
yes.
much meat in this podcast, and I pray you guys would go back and listen to it, because I think for all of us, none of us expect. Jeff didn't wake up that day and say, "I will be a part of the largest mass shooting in U.S. history today. Oh, by the way, it'll be at a country concert in Las Vegas."
Right.
Nobody would have thought. And yet we have to be prepared, folks, because things, are growing crazy. And Jeff,
Yeah.
I want to round the corner. I just really want to give you just a ton of credit for the after piece. Um, Anybody that was there that day is going to struggle with post-traumatic stress syndrome, or disorder. It's going to happen because I have a good friend of mine, that's a pastor, and he said we just weren't created to see that kind of horror and to have it indelibly placed into our mind and our memory. And
Right.
so, Jeff, I know that you addressed that. You had the courage. Now you're a warrior. You're a warrior's warrior. But what you went through was a visit to hell,
Yeah.
and you chose to get help. What would you say to? I mean, there are veterans that are listening. There are folks that they've been through trauma. What would you say to them about the process that you went through?
Well, the first thing I would say is that after experiencing an event like that, or for some of the veterans, combat events, or just regular, citizens that are part of an active shooter situation like I was,
Hmm.
that it's normal to feel like, confused and depressed and whatnot. There's a myriad of different ways, constant anger. Like, there's a whole lot that goes into this.
Wow.
Um, I would just say that it's normal. And I would even go as far as to say, is if you don't feel that way, then there's probably something wrong with you, or it hasn't hit you yet. you
Mm,
know, and it
good.
takes
Good
people a
one.
different amount of time.
Yeah.
Uh,
Wow.
and, for people like me, it's not. Don't feel ashamed to say, I need help. And I'll tell you, when I realized that I needed it, was actually very quickly after it happened. If we have time, I just want to tell you this,
Yeah.
because
Please.
this really cemented it to me. Like, before I went to that concert, I was in San Diego, training, and I told this Navy SEAL, Buds Canada, or he was in Buds, and he had just failed his pistol qualification, and he's like, if I fail another one, I'm out. He's like, and when his buddy came to me, he's like, "Hey, can you help him?" I'm like, "Absolutely." Said, "I'm going to this country concert. I'll be back Sunday, or Monday. How about, we meet up Tuesday at the Escondido Police Department range, and however long it takes, I'll get them, through that qualification. Well, little did I know I'd be in that event, right?
Hmm.
So I get back. I can't remember if it was Monday, and I'm like, man, I promised this kid that I was going to come help him, and everybody's like, oh no, dude, don't worry about it. I'm like, no, I promised him I'm going to help him. I'm going to go help him. So I went to the range the next day. I'm
Wow.
sitting there with one of my buddies on my SWAT team. My back's to there's 3 ranges there. My back's to the range. I didn't even realize that their SWAT team had come up to the line and they're getting ready to start shooting. So I'm leaned over, trunk or whatever in my car, getting everything ready for this guy to show up so we can start shooting. And all of a sudden, those M4s let loose. And Tim, I hit the ground and was crawled up underneath the car.
I can imagine.
I was back in Vegas, right?
Wow.
And
Wow.
my buddy that was with me, he's like, hey, Jeff. I'm like, get down, He's like, it's okay, man. He's like, come here. He's helped me get out from under the car, picks me up, gives me a big hug. He's like, hey, brother, I love you. Everything's okay, you
Wow.
know? But that was the beginning I was like, it's not okay,
Yeah.
you know?
Wow. Jeff,
And then I went on to, went to a company that really helped me out with some of, stuff that was going on in my brain. It was a chemical thing, really.
yeah. Yeah. What was the company, if you don't mind me asking?
It was Vitania.
Okay. Yeah.
So they were wonderful, and it was free to
So,
first responders and military.
so if you're listening to this podcast and you need help, hopefully this is something that will help you.
Yeah.
I, I had a season in my life where I went through counseling and it made all the difference in the world. So
Yeah.
I think, we all, especially if you have background in military or law enforcement, and you've seen things, you can tend to go, oh, suck it up, buttercup, you'll be fine. Well, to Jeff's point, maybe you won't be. And that's
Right.
why 23 vets a day take their lives. So help people get help if you can.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of it out there, and it doesn't cost anything.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, I tell you, I know, you've had awards from the Justice Department. What you did was nothing short of heroic. I know you don't view it that way, but I will tell you, many people who you helped save that day do. They think that way, and I just want to. I know you are not the guy, which is, it's taken me 5 years to get you here to talk about it. You're not the guy to toot your own horn, but I just felt this story was so compelling. And I'm so honored you're on the Lionheart team, because as we
Me
go
too.
out, yeah, and we're training organizations how to survive. I don't know too many folks have a person with your experience, actually teaching people how to stay alive. But I love the fact, brother, that you're a man of faith, you're humble, and I'm just grateful that you're my friend. So I really appreciate you taking time today. Folks, let me just say this. If this podcast needs to kind of be everywhere, and that's not tooting our horn, that's just saying this information may save lives, across the nation. So let me encourage you to like, share, subscribe. A lot of folks have commented that they've been unsubscribed from this channel because I do have a conservative bent. And I know YouTube, doesn't always promote those kinds of channels, but this is life-saving stuff. And that's why we do what we do, with Lionheart. And so if I could ask you, like, share, subscribe. Jeff will be up on our website soon. We're in the process of kind of redoing some things. We're trying to help more people, be prepared, kind of for the storm that is here. Let me say this. I'm not a conspiracist guy. You guys know me that have listened, but I will tell you, folks, listen to me. There's a storm coming to the United States. We've let a lot of really bad people into the country. They walked across the border. And Jeff is a true expert from Los Angeles with gangs and everything else. That's one element. The other element is the terrorist side. And a lot of highly trained folks have walked across into our country. And there's a lot of information that in the days ahead, there will be coordinated attacks. trying to mimic what we saw on October 7th. And the thing I would say, we don't I don't traffic in fear. I do traffic in wisdom and preparation. A couple huge takeaways for me today is, man, I gotta, I'm in the gym every day, but I got to work harder. I got to be able to carry that guy. I got to be able to go over the bike rack. I've got to be able to mentally control myself. The other thing is tactics. I need to make sure I'm reinforcing for those that have had tactical backgrounds. If we don't go to the range for a while and we go out there, it's a mess, so we want to make sure we're reinforcing. But then the third is being medically prepared. And I carry, Jeff, what we would equate to like a fat kit from the Secret Service. I carry a medical kit in my car, never knowing, today it may just be a car accident, or it may be a mass casualty event. So let me just really encourage you guys, stay focused, stay trained. This is a season in our country where we need patriots to rise up, and above all, stand for what's right. The election has shown us that a lot of people believe in the United States. We believe in our values, and we got to stand for those rights and values. We cannot any longer be told how we should think. And that's, unfortunately, you see a lot of those talking points on the mainstream media side. And again, I don't try to play politics, but I do believe in standing for what's right. So, Jeff, thank you, my friend. It has truly been an honor. I hope millions of people see this. And I think we may need to do a part 2. And I think there may be a lot of folks that across, the podcast world that say, man, I'd love to get that guy and talk to him. So again, at Lionheart Skills, reach out. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe, like, share, hit that notification button, but mostly comment. I want to hear your thoughts and comments today. So please be careful out there, be safe, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, brother. It was an honor to be on.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.